Hey, what happened to my light? Ah, we're empty. That's not gonna work. We're live though. It's 10:02 or so. Today I want to talk about the thumbnail I just put up is actually a Gen 6 big block Chevy with two GT45 turbos on it, and I want to know why that's not more of a thing. we should be seeing that all over the place because that's a good combination. It's a good combination for a number of reasons. If you take a look up the videos that I have, we ran the big block with a single GT45, and as the guys will know here, that a GT45 turbo is about a 750 horsepower turbo. And they're really cheap, anywhere from, you can get them as less than $200 all the way up to $250 or $300, whatever. But even at $300, it's a cheap deal. So two of them, $600. Two of them would make 1,500 horsepower on that combination on a big block if you had enough, the rest of the big block to go along with that. But so I ran the video that I ran the single turbo on it. And the problem with a single GT45 on a big block is that you basically run out of hot side flow. So you get fairly high back pressure. It's very responsive. So it's got really good boost response on a, on a let's say a cammed 454 from the wrecking yard. We did it on the Gen 6. And so it's pretty responsive with a single turbo. So if you want to run 7 pounds, you want something really responsive, the back pressure is going to be a little bit high. You don't have to worry about that if you're running low boost on stuff because you're just wanting it to be responsive. That works really well. You can run it with a factory fuel injected manifold. We ran it with a blow through application. And I think we ended up running it on that one. The one on the thumbnail is we ran port injection on the, we had a Victor Jr. or something that was converted for EFI. But there's lots of ways to do it. You could run it as a blow-through carburetor. You could run it with a factory fuel injection. Obviously, you're going to need on the Gen 6, because it's port injection, you're going to need bigger injectors to support the power level, obviously. And then especially if you're going with the 85, you need some good size injectors. But all of that works out. And so you can make lots of power. And so if you want a single one, you can have it be fairly responsive and it's inexpensive. You obviously could go to a bigger turbo. You could do a S475 or a 7875, especially the T6 that Summit sells. I mean, everybody sells that BorgWarner S475-ish kind of turbo. And at 1,000 horsepower, that's pretty good for a single. And as a T6, you don't have to worry about hot side flow. You're going to get to the hot side and the cold side flow on a big block like that makes 450 or 500 horsepower NA. You're going to get to it. You're going to get to those about the same point. So they'd be fairly even. It'd be a good combination. Not going to be responsive as the GT45 would, but if you're looking for more power, so I'm just saying that there's the in between. There's a single GT45 which is real responsive, and if you want to make 500 or 600 horsepower or whatever, that's a good deal. If you want to make more than that, the area in between, and then if you want to make a lot more than that, two of the GT45s obviously work pretty well. And so if you wanted to go do some kind of drag racing. Maybe you want to do cheap no prep or something like that. I mean, the power that those guys are making on some of those things are ridiculous, but you can fairly easily make 1,500 horsepower with two of those GT45s. If you have a big block, and the more powerful it is, obviously the better off you're going to be. But it's pretty easy. Those turbos will easily support that level, and they'll easily support 1,000 horsepower. And two of them on a big motor like a 454 are going to be at least fairly responsive. It would not be my recommendation for, twin turboing a street car, although it would work as twin turbos on a big block in something, a Chevelle or a truck or whatever you want to put it on. And it's a cheap way to go. But if you're not using all of that power, if you're not using 1,500 horsepower worth of turbos, and you only want to make 700, there would be better options to go with than that, even though those are fairly cheap. You could put smaller turbos on them. You could have them be more responsive. You don't have to worry about, because that's the thing, is you're trading on turbo applications like that. You're trading power potential on, ultimate power potential for response, essentially. So that's always our trade-off. We want a gigantic turbo that will make 2,000 horsepower, or turbos that will make 2,000 horsepower, but we want it to come on at 2,000 RPM. It's really hard to get both of those. So ultimately there's a trade-off one way or the other. So you can let's say optimize the turbo for the thing that you want to do. And there's a better turbo or turbos choice for doing that. And so you choose your turbos accordingly. But there will always be, some kind of drawback. I honestly don't know too many people that, hey, I've chosen my turbo because I only want to run 7 to 10 pounds or whatever driving around the street. I want it to be a street car. I'm running it on pump gas. I'm not trying to make a million horsepower. I'm driving around and it's fun. Like one of the guys here has one on his 8.1 and he's got a turbo on it and he's only running like 5 or 6 pounds. He's got 300,000 miles on it and he drives it all the time. And that's a perfect application. So you size your turbo for that. You don't care that you can't make 1,500 horsepower because you're never going to do that. The poor transmission is probably would not be happy with that. And you don't need 1,500 horsepower towing a trailer. So if you're honest about what you're doing with it, you size your turbo or turbos accordingly. And you would be very happy. And my point was that I don't know too many guys that want to do something like that where, hey, I need like 5 or 6 pounds or 6, 7 pounds so that I'm making 800 foot-pounds of torque and whatever horsepower that equates to, because I'm most interested in the low speed part of the power curve where we're making lots of torque for, doing heavy things or even just accelerating and having fun. All that's really good. You have 800 foot-pounds of torque, you're going to have some fun things to do with that. I don't know too many guys that have that and want that and get that and then go, yeah, but if I only had that and I had the ability to make 1,500 horsepower, because let's face it, and we talk about this all the time on the channel, if you're making 800, 900, 1,000, 1,500, whatever the number is, you have some really expensive other things that you have to buy. A transmission for a 1,500 horsepower motor is way more money than the 1,500 horsepower was. So you have that, and then you have the transmission, and then the drive shaft, and the rear end, and the tires, and the brakes, and all that stuff that all cost big chunks of money. And like I said, the transmission could cost as much as the motor did. And then you have a rear end, which probably is not going to cost as much as the transmission or the engine, but it all costs a lot of money. So making the power fairly easy. But choose it for what you're trying to get done. I mean, when I had my little Focus or the Civic or any of those things, and I had them and I was running on, 7 or 8 pounds or whatever, it was a lot of fun. I had a great time when I had the little Jackson Racing supercharger on my on the Focus, or on the Focus was a lot more fun when we put the bigger blower on there. But when we ran the little Jackson Racing supercharger on the Civic, or when I on the D series, boost obviously makes everything better, especially on a motor like that where torque is kind of a fun thing. Running the little turbos on, even at low boost, it was fantastic to drive that around every day and to have something that made boost and be able to get into boost all the time. Because it's like having an NA motor, but then having a reward after that, which is, obviously nothing but beneficial. But I would be interested to see more. I'm curious why we don't see more big blocks driving around with, twin GT45s on, guys running those in drag race applications. And so let me know in the comments what you guys think. Are guys not doing that because you could just do that with a lighter weight LS and still make lots of power? They will not make as much low speed power as a big block does. And ultimately, if you're trying to make, thousands of horsepower, a bigger motor is going to do that. A big block is going to make more than, ultimately a big block is going to make more than an LS. It's that range in between that people need to argue about. So, but what's our performance life without, a bunch of arguing? The thing that I like about the twin GT45s is that they were so inexpensive, because, for, like I said, it's amazing that for a couple of $100 you can get something that will allow you to make that much power. It's kind of crazy. I mean, we talk about that. We talk about the one thing, this turbo is only a couple $100. Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that have to go along with that ultimately make it more expensive. And we saw that with some of the, the low buck blower videos that I did. Yeah, the blower is an inexpensive blower, but then we have, in order to package that low buck blower, there's lots of other expensive things that have to go along with that. That's part of the deal. We can't go to the wrecking yard and get something other than the motor itself, which is a really good deal, but you can't go there and get something that even that's that's a few $100s or whatever, or even $1,000, and go, oh look here, now I can make all of this power. There's always other things that have to go along with that. Even if you go to the wrecking yard and I get guys recommending, hey, well here, just use these turbos from the from the turbo diesel stuff. Yeah, you can do that. But a lot of times you have weird flanges. The turbos weren't designed for doing what we're doing. And new turbos are like these GT45s that we're talking about are just so cheap. There's almost no reason anymore to go to the wrecking yard to get junkyard turbos other than it being cool and it's a junkyard experience. And I recommend it to everybody. But inexpensive turbos are just so, they're all over on the internet. And I've had nothing but good luck with them. So it's just so much easier to just go get other turbos and make them work. And by now, most of them are kind of known quantities. Like if somebody asks, well, what does a GT45 do? Well, look at Richard. He's run it on everything from a little 4-cylinder up to, up to big displacement V8s. So we kind of have a pretty good idea what all that stuff does. And so if you put it on your 5.3 or 4.8 or small block Chevy or Hemi or K-Series Honda, we kind of know what they're going to do. And so that's good information, because for a lot of guys, not guys that would be here, but for a lot of guys, they still don't understand what a turbo does and how much it helps and how responsive it is and what the sizing has to do with how much power you can make and how much, how much lag something has. They just don't have a feel for any of that because they just don't have any experience. So if they're brand new to turbocharging, all they see is, hey, look, this guy added a turbo and he made all this crazy power. Okay, I definitely want that kind of power. Well, there's lots of stuff that goes with great power comes a great responsibility. And the responsibility part is just equal to you're spending lots of other money and on other places. And not to mention the fact that, you have to be responsible while you're driving something that makes 1,000 horsepower, but that's a whole different chat time. So let's see what you guys got going on. Do you think that, and we'll do our poll here. Okay, should twin turbo big blocks be more popular in racing? Let me know what you think. Let me know. Gotta go. Let's see what guys going on. Medic Fireman, did you have a question? What's up? Venezuela, awesome. I think is Venezuela where they have do they have anacondas down there? I always relate to the different countries and by what kind of snakes they have. Car Farm, what's up? You're a cheap deal? Because only boomers run big blocks, ask Tom. 454 or bigger. You can make it bigger too. You can make 496s out of them. I mean, if you're building one and you're going to upgrade the rods and the piston stuff, I don't know why you'd stay with a 396 or a 427 or 454. You should make a 496 out of it. 460 is better than a 454. Okay, you can also do this. This also applies to big block Fords. Draw through. I had 2 TO4 turbos on my jet boat. That's cool. I want to do draw through stuff so bad. Double R, what's going on? My square body has a 468 with a single GT45, and it's a monster on the street. It's plenty responsive, I bet. Plenty turbo left, can tow uphill on a passing lane. That's good. It will definitely make a surprising amount of torque, because the thing that's cool about turbos that a lot of guys don't realize is you're like, yeah, that thing's only good for 700 horsepower or whatever. Yeah, but everything below that, because it only makes 10 pounds out here, but it can make 20 lower in the curve. So it can make all the torque, because 700 horsepower at 2,000 RPM is a lot of torque. Bigger is better. Do you test Mopar 383s? I have never run one. the guys at West Tech have run lots of them because Dulcich and Freiberger have run 383 Mopars there. I've only ever run one big block Mopar. That was a 440, and it was on loan from Freiberger. Twin GT45s on a big block Ford. Yeah, they work the same way. 396 with GT45s. We've done a video showing the effect of cam advance and retard, say from 10 degrees retard to 10 degrees advance. I have done that test. I did that test specifically on a small block Chevy. Here's the problem with doing that test, like all these tests, is that the gain that you get is not universal. Every time you advance the cam, you don't pick up low speed power. Every time you retard the cam, you don't add top end power. The reason for that is because you don't know where you're starting relative to how effective the cam is with the combination that you have. What are the valve events now that you're working with? So maybe the cam already has 4 degrees of advance built into it. And maybe relative to what the engine wanted, it was already, relatively speaking, advanced anyway, because people are talking advance and retard. I'm just using that as a generic term. So you need to know what the engine is, what the engine wants, and then what happens if we change that. So there's not a universal thing, but I have done that on a small block Chevy. I like to tell you over and over, big block Chevys have no turbos because they don't rev, right? Exactly. Small responsive turbos are great for people that don't have friends they need to impress. And actually, if you didn't tell somebody what size turbo was under the hood and you had a big block with a single GT45 on it and you made 800 foot-pounds of torque and you mashed them in the back, push them back in their seat, they would be impressed by that. Bearings tend to spin on those big blocks when you crank big power. I don't understand that statement. Half baked. I have a 396 with an older 256 blower and twin GT45s. Haven't fired it. So you have a 396 with a blower and turbos blowing into the blower. So you've gone like all pro street on it. So if you have that, if that's what you're building and you're running, you have to now also add nitrous to it because it's not fully pro street unless it has at least 3 power adders on it. Only if you run a big block Chevy twin turbo cam. That's right. We're singing Deck the Halls. Building a twin GT45 on my big block 478. Aluminum rods and pistons. Just need to throw the turbo on it and send it. There you go. I'm interested about the aluminum rods. Is it a race-only motor? Twin GT35s or 37s are also a decent option. I mean, 1,000 to 1,400 ultra responsive is a good time. Yeah, 1,000 horsepower is the new 500. Has been for quite a while now. Brian and Richard, I picked up a 72 F250 with a 390 FE. Very cool. Do you have any recommendations for heads, cam, and intake for mild build? The factory lower compression 72 had. Who else makes FE heads? Is it only Edelbrock, or does Trickflow make aluminum heads? I would recommend aluminum heads. I mean, the low dollar route would be to mill those heads and then do your own porting. But aluminum heads go a long way to making a better street motor. And I don't know what kind of power you're trying to make, but there are lots of cams available for FEs. So something, 224, 230 kind of thing is a good streetish cam, especially for 390. Twin GT35s for 1,400. Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that. Do you think if I get better rods and pistons to increase the compression of 5.3 and better injectors on a mild cam would make? No. The pistons and rods aren't going to, unless you change the compression, and the compression is only going to help a little bit. Rods aren't going to help power at all. Injectors aren't going to help power at all. Injectors are just going to be able to supply the necessary fuel for the power you have. I have lots of 500 horsepower 5.3 things up there. And if you're going to try to make 500 horsepower with a 5.3, you need everything. You need a big cam, you need ported heads, you need an intake, you need all that stuff. 427 big block or 427 LS. I don't know what that question is. That the both of those are available if that's your question. Waiting for my tax return to pick up a truck, but I've still got my eye on a crew cab big block OBS. Would be a blast with twin GT35s. Twin turbo big blocks with those horrible compression ratios are just begging for 15 pounds on pump gas. Yeah, the low compression stuff. Twin GT37s may be good for 1400. On the racing side of track events, put a lot of extra rules on turbo big blocks, turbo size, weight, etc. Okay. I think I'll do a razor blade rebuild setup with a nice cam and intake, plus turbo headers, all full of turbo-y goodness. Richard, do you know of any big block Ford dual plane intake manifolds? I don't know. Did anybody do any of this stuff to replace the factory ones? I'm sure Edelbrock and those guys did the long runner stuff, but I don't know about dual plane stuff. I think you'd have to convert one. I don't remember seeing one of those. Richard, will a GT45 spool okay on a mild 318 E85 on a carburetor? Well, what is the NA power output of the 318? And also the question would be, how much power are you trying to make? Are you trying to make 700 or 750 with that? Because if you're not, if you have a 300 horsepower 318 and you're only trying to make 500, then let's go with a smaller turbo. If you're trying to use all of what a GT45 has to offer, then it will work on that. My stock bottom end 302 is running 20 pounds from a GT45, methanol with 10% nitro being injected over 10 pounds of boost. Really? That seems like a lot. $20 on a 302 would seem like you'd be beyond the flow potential of the turbo. If you're building a street truck with a big block and had to have twins, I'd say GT3582s would work. They will. That's a good 1,000 horsepower combination. 386 twin charge, yeah, but now it needs like a 50 shot or something, or 100 shot. Or to never even use the nitrous, just so that it has the pro street look. Can you compound turbo big block? Yes, you can, although there's not normally a reason to do that unless you're going really, really big on turbos. How much boost without ring gap? I don't know, because I don't know what your ring gap is on your Gen 6 454. Shelby America makes FE blocks and heads. Yes, they do. They make aluminum stuff. Going to compound the single GT45 468 in the spring. Okay. Big blocks rev, RJ, big red Camaro spins the motor 8500. Why are the specs of the sloppy stage 2 better for street use than their stage 3? The stage 3 is a much bigger cam, right? So it's going to be softer down low. The idle's not going to be as good. You would ideally use a different stall converter in that. And it's not just for those two cams, but it's for anything that goes from a 220 to a 230 cam. There's a few manifolds with injector bunks for big block Fords. I don't remember seeing any dual planes though. Single plane stuff is fairly common for that, but dual plane stuff is usually few and far between. Is there an optimal ratio of back pressure to boost pressure? Effect on efficiency, lag, bottleneck, etc. Yeah, but unfortunately, there's an optimal ratio for different applications, not just for a universal optimum. You won't have an optimum boost pressure to back pressure for response and for peak power. Those will be different things. And so depending on how responsive you want the turbo for what you're doing, you would size the turbo for that. And then your boost pressure to back pressure relationship would come out to be something accordingly. Like on our Bonneville deal, we had less back pressure than boost pressure because we didn't care about boost response. It wasn't necessary for what we were doing. We couldn't put power down on the lower gears anyway. We didn't need boost response. What we needed is the thing to make good power from post VTEC 5500 to 8500. And to do that, we sized the turbo so it was very efficient in that combination of NA power at that RPM range and turbo size, and we had more than enough load because we're loading the thing. We had an aero load basically at 160 plus miles an hour all the way up to 227. So it, but that's not the turbo that I would choose for a slightly sub 2-liter B series on the street. It definitely would have a different size turbo on there that had more back pressure and had more response. Street 454 with a single S475, T4 or T6. Again, it's that choice is what you're trying to get done with it. Do you want more response? Are you using a T6 on a 454? Are you using every bit of that turbo? Do you want to absolutely max out what that turbo can do? Or are you more interested in how the turbo comes up? So which one of those things you're putting more weight to would determine whether you'd pick a T4 or a T6. Sometimes an S475, to pick a T4 or a T6 is a big expense thing. Most of the S475s come as T6s, and they're least expensive that way. And then you have to get a T4 upgrade or a hot side swap, and then that becomes more expensive. So that would be also a consideration. Have some data logs on it. You'll send them over. Okay, cool. T4 responds with back pressure is limited. I didn't really see that in the testing when I did a T4 versus a T6 housing test on the dyno. But we were only ran like 900 horsepower or something. I cut the injector bungs out of an LS intake and plastic welded them to a Vortec 4.3. Okay. Waiting on fuel rails and then 14 PSI, maybe 20 if self-control fails. Todd, what's going on? I was looking at trick flow power port heads. I'll check out the Shelbys too. The Shelbys will probably be more money. If you compound turbo big block, how would you set up be turbo wise and cam and injector size? You need the injector size to flow enough fuel for whatever power level you're getting at. So my question is how much power do you want to make? And then why are you doing a compound to get there? And then the compound choice of how you're feeding a big turbo and a small turbo would be dictated by how much power you're trying to make, just like any turbo choice. It's an old drag build. Let's see. I put in new pistons in to get 8.5 to 1. I had an old 314, 324 crane and roller in it until the lifter broke. Made 400 wheel. With that cam, 8.5 to 1 through a turbo 400 and a Data 60. That's a lot of power for a 318. It must have been, was it really high compression? And is that a really big roller cam and a single plane and all that? T4 is fine for the street because I've yet to have issues. Yeah, like I said, the T4, T6 argument, people think that, oh, it's a big block. It's universal that you should have a T6. It's not. It's absolutely not. Again, it comes down to, do you want to get to the point where a hot side flow restriction or back pressure issue, do you want to get through that point, like to that point and past that point where I need that last, what you can call out whatever horsepower number you think that is, going to a bigger hot side? Do you want to get past that? Or are you going to be using that? Or on the front side of that, is the response rate that you get from the T4 over the T6 more important all the way up to that point? So again, that's the decision you're making. It's not a universal thing. Would you rather tow the 383 LS or 4853 turbo? I don't know. I've never tried both of them. A 48 or a 53 turbo towing, since a lot of towing is out of boost on level ground, you probably you might get better. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I need to data log that. A 383 LS NA, because it's going to be higher compression, might actually get a little bit better mileage on a straight and level cruise, which towing, there's a lot of that. The turbo would definitely make, a 48 or 53 turbo would definitely make more torque than a 383 does. Not seeing dual plane manifolds. Yeah, it's For some reason, people think that dual plane manifolds and port injection doesn't work together, but it really does. It doesn't care. Are all Gen 5 LT engines dual injection? No, they're not. In fact, most of them are not. Big blocks can be very scary. They spin easy. I can't put the turbos on before I pass the EU inspection. Okay, that they have in Norway. Happy holidays. Jumping in my 68 Camaro now with a 406. Joseph, I think only the LT5 is dual port. Yeah. They make T6 flange spool valves. Yeah, but you don't want that on a street motor. Big roller, single plane, and some RPM. Yeah, okay. That's good power for 318. Big block Chevy turbo doesn't need much flow for the street on the track. Wide open throttle, you need the flow. For the person that was asking about my thoughts on rotaries, I don't answer questions with the word thoughts in them because I don't know what you mean by that. You got to be specific about what your question is. Do I like them? Do I dislike them? Do I think that they rev? Do I think that they're cool? Do I think that they're dumb? You got to be specific about your question. Admiral, I have not even run a turbo on a big block Ford. I'm trying to think if I've even run, I don't even know if I've run like even a Vortec or a blower or something on a big block. I don't think I have. Dual planes would have inconsistent flow between cylinders because of the different lengths, but most modern ECMs can do individual fuel trims. That's true to a point, but single planes also have distribution issues. Every intake manifold has distribution issues, but port injection still works on a dual plane. Otherwise, it wouldn't work on a carburetor. I know, that's right, Admiral. And I think I've said that many times. That I've never run a turbo on there. I'm trying to think back through the Ford stuff. I don't remember running a blower on it. On the chassis dyno, we've done Kenny Bells and stuff and Vortex on big blocks that were just bolt-on kits like for the EFI stuff, but not, I don't think, on the engine dyno. Do you think that rotaries are good sounding motors? I do like them. I like an unmuffled rotary is amazingly loud. And the turbo stuff is great. Well, I remember going on the racetrack with my Mustang when I was running showroom stock when I first bought it and being out there and racing the rotaries. And I couldn't even hear my car running when they were next to me. They were so loud. I remember watching the kudzus were racing when I was racing, and it was it's pretty cool. I want to run. I was just talking to my buddy Jimmy yesterday about I want to run a rotary on the engine dyno. On the L33 test engine you've been running, you mentioned BTR valve train upgrades to support the higher RPM. Can you elaborate on what springs? Yeah, we run the extreme RPM springs on this last go around on the trick flow heads. And we have had hardened push rods in there. I think for a long time they're just comp 80 well push rods. There's nothing special about those. They're just the right length. The rockers are all stock, no trunnion upgrades or anything. They're just the high mileage rockers that came on that particular L33. So the spring thing and the that particular cam is a stable cam for this RPM. I was always told big block Chevrolet stuff is weak and always breaks, even stock versus small block. Yeah, that's an incorrect statement. Started with a dual. So whoever's telling you that, Brandon, you need to tell them that they don't really understand engines or motors, because then they'll get mad. They'll talk to you about electric stuff. I started with a dual plane on the 468. Single GT45 and number 6 ran hotter, so I swapped to a single plane. It's possible to turbo a 5.3 LT motor, or is it really fuel limited? You can put a turbo on it, but you are, and both of those are true. You can put a turbo on it, and you are limited by fuel. You have to upgrade the injector size, and then the pump, and then the lobe on the cam to get more fuel supply from the pump. And most guys would put the LT4 stuff in there from the factory supercharged deal, and then you could have enough fuel to run a reasonable amount of boost on a 5.3. Do Gen 6 454 engines have factory height protected pistons? Yes, they do. Although the Gen 6, one of them, an L21, I think, might have forged stuff in it. I think it has at least a forged crank. It might have forged rods and pistons in it also. Also, to confirm they exist, I came across a 2000 to 2002 6-liter 99 also. And I thought 99 to 2000 were the only 6-liters that had iron heads in them. I'm still looking for iron LS heads if anybody has any. I love when people get mad about calling them motors. They're so confidently wrong. It's like arguing about nothing, you know. L21 is forged pistons, but they're rare. I think the BNR, isn't the crank forged on that also? In a 1471 on production block 454, 35 pounds boost, and the block is the most dependable part. That's a lot of boost. So should twin turbo big blocks be more popular in racing? 92% are saying yes. I put Hypertechnics in the turbo 468. We're at 20 pounds holding fine. Yeah, the as long as you don't detonate it, it'll hold up to a lot. How much boost do you think you can run on stock LQ4 rods and pistons? Well, so far we've run 29 pounds and we've made over 1,500 horsepower with stock rods and pistons and crank and block. The cranks are cast on the L21. We're singing Deck the Halls. From what I've read, the L21 is a 4-bolt main forged steel crank roller cam engine with a LS style distributor or distributorless. Yellow Bullet saying that they had a forged crank. Forged pistons and a forged crank. They're saying L29, but it's not an L29. All the stuff that although that's wiki, so. So yeah, I don't know. Phony, you're here, so we can start with the live feed now. That's good. I can see that if the engine is still available, Steve, I don't know what. Oh, the 6-liter. I don't want to buy an iron 6-liter and have it shipped. I mean, an iron headed 6-liter. I just need some iron heads. Big block stuff is not cheap, especially the cylinder heads. It's pretty good on an LQ4 piston and rod. Yeah, the 29 pounds isn't the important part of that equation. The 1,500 horsepower and 1,300 foot-pounds is the important part. It doesn't, the boost pressure is just where that happens at. Because you could run 29 pounds and only make 1,000 horsepower. And so that wouldn't be the same thing. We made good power because we had good heads and cam and intake manifold on it. Big blocks just don't rev and won't make the same horsepower stock bottom end because of how stupid the torque numbers are in big blocks. I don't know about the don't rev part. I don't agree with that. I saw a YouTube clip of a GMC truck with a throttle by wire and the remote start went wide open throttle and the door locked and it burnt to the ground. Did that really happen? LQ4 street truck, 226, 238 to a 234, 238. I don't know what the other specs are on the cam. What's the lift change? What's the lobe separation angle change? I don't care that it says turbo cam because any specs that you gave me also says turbo cam after it to me. So you're going from a 226, 238 cam to a 234, 238 cam. The bigger cam should make a little more power. I don't know how much it's going to lose down low though. 1,500 horsepower on stock rods and pistons. What broke when it let go? On that motor, nothing broke. That motor's still alive. We made lots of runs. We made only one run at 1,540, but with lots of other runs that were above between 1,000 and 1,500 as we went up in RPM. I mean, as we went up in boost to get there. That 6-liter is still alive. So we broke other big bang motors, and usually a rod or a piston is what breaks on those at when you start getting to the all of it level. L21 and L29 are 8 counterweight cranks. LV3 are going for $2,000. That's a lot. I'd love to find an all factory forged part to build a big block Chevy. Do they make it? No, I mean, unless you go find an L88 or and even those rods they called them forged rods, but it's not like an aftermarket forged rod. But those L21s have a forged piston and a forged crank and a 4-bolt block. You're pretty good. Yeah, I'd pick the engine up just because if you want to pay for shipping the heads from the East Coast, I'll send them. Steve, the problem with that is shipping iron heads from the East Coast is more expensive than just buying heads. I use a new Scat Pro Stock 9000 series crank in my 454, rated for 700 horsepower. Glad to hear you did 1,500 horsepower stock. No, the 1,500 horsepower was not a Gen 6 454. The 1,500 horsepower was an LS. I'm building a 540 now. Brodex heads, Furia valves, Iski springs, 4,500. Yeah, not worth it anymore. Going in an old school car, so it works for what's being done. Parts is why I'm dumping those parts. The cost is why I'm dumping those parts. Honestly, going to do a rec port 6-liter instead. Better bang for the buck. It is lighter, and you can, if you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower, you could do that. Burns is in the house. What's the most boost you've run on a 2005-3? I don't remember specifically having a 2000, but that's a Gen 3. We've done 1,300 horsepower on a 5.3, and I'm pretty sure that there's more to be had there. And on a Gen 4, even more because it has better rods. Turbo cam, that's right. KD, oh, you came across L88 heads? I'd buy those for $200. You might have already talked about it before, but Wouldn't a big overlap, big NA style cam be more of an issue with a turbo setup with lots of back pressure than a turbo cam? I don't know what you mean by the back pressure comment. Turbos don't have a lot of back pressure, or can be sized. They don't have a lot of back pressure. So those are different issues. The back pressure that you have with a turbo combination is going to be a function of the NA power output, the displacement, and then the turbo sizing for what you're trying to achieve. Then an NA style cam with lots of overlap, if you're changing from some other cam to that cam, you need to get rid of the turbo and look at what that camshaft does NA. Whatever it does NA, it's going to do after you add boost. So if it loses power down low because it's a bigger camshaft and gains power at the top, it's still going to do that with the turbo. And the back pressure is not going to, all the boost isn't going to bleed out because of overlap. And that stuff's not going to happen. You should just think of the camshaft as an NA camshaft. What does it do NA? Does it idle worse? It's going to do that with a turbo. Does it have low idle vacuum? It's going to do that with a turbo. Is it soft down low? It's going to be exaggerated because of the turbo, because now it's not going to be as responsive. Does it make more power on the big end? Yes, it's going to do that with a turbo. Yeah, Steve, no, I appreciate the offer. That's cool. I wish that shipping wasn't $1 million. Yeah, B&R, the cast crank stuff, like we ran that 454 with these two turbos. We ran it with, we didn't turn it all the way up, but we ran it with the Vortec at like 18 pounds or something. The cast crank is not the thing that I'm worried about, especially on a stock bottom end deal. The thing that's going to break probably is a rod or a piston if you get to ultimately where the power level is, where that becomes, hey, this is the weak part. It's not going to be the crank. It's not going to be the block, even a cast crank. I'm really getting hooked on electric unicycles. That's pretty cool. I would love to learn how to ride a unicycle. An electric one would just, be icing on the cake. Was commenting on the diesel truck that went rogue and burned up. Oh, okay, a diesel deal. Instead of L6, because overrun on a diesel thing when they continue to go and feed themselves, that's a bad deal. A set of LS6 291s, but sold them. I just can't justify the cost of everything. I want to drive my car at this point. I found a running Vortec 350 Jeep. I do that. Yeah. I know. You just want to drive it. What's your 2024 list looking like? It's all the stuff. Big block is 10 to 20 grand to full build for 700 to 800 horsepower without a power adder. The $500 5.3 and $300 turbo. Mitten, you need to slow your roll. Everybody's here for the right reason. To talk and share ideas and power and stuff. Yeah, we're all here to be friends. Nobody gets to come here and start having attitude, because then you just get kicked out. Because attitude's not necessary for what we're doing. How much loss goes into running a turbo? Basically running a turbo, not plumbed to an intake, but restrictor to simulate load. Unfortunately, that does not simulate what happens with the turbo. It doesn't do that like it does with the blower, because you don't have the extra airflow going in to the motor to increase the exhaust flow to get the temperature. It just doesn't work. The only way to do that would to do it correctly, to really figure that out, would be to have two motors run side by side on a dual dyno setup, and have the boost, have the exhaust feeding the turbo from run, and then the cold side feeding into the other one, or feeding into the one that you're trying to test. And then you could get a reasonable idea of what it takes to drive the turbo. The one thing that we do know is that it takes a lot less based on the power output, relative to boost. It's a lot less than driving any type of supercharger. Building a 5.3 LS with twin VS Racing 7665 with a truck Norris cam, trying to decide what size AR for the turbo, looking for good strip application options. So Rodney, what kind of power are you trying to make with that? Because those are pretty big turbos. How about a turbo on a Mopar? Yeah, the turbos don't care about what what motor they go on. They make more power. All L29s and 21s are 4 volts on all 5. Yep. Yeah, I don't. Again, I don't. It's hard to get people to understand why they could step into a conversation and have a conversation and express their opinion and also be cool and be polite. I don't understand. My 96 L29 Suburban was a 2-bolt main. I've never seen a 2-bolt main Gen 6 block. Never. I don't think that they even made 2-bolt main Gen 6 blocks. Car Farm, my daily is a big block Dodge, 135 cubic inch van of the minis. Nice. That's right. It's a 2.5. It's the big block of the mini Mopars. I don't know what size the snail is, but it instantly hits 25 pounds with a frozen gate. Well, right now, Ben, it's boost weather right now back there, right? Okay. So I've made all the requests. So, Ben, is the turbo, is the wastegate just like shut solid? And only engineer minor defect of a 454 Gen 6 is you're limited to a stock single roller timing chain setup. You can put a double roller timing chain on if you don't want to use the crank sensor, and then they have different front covers for those as well. I would sat for many years and rusted shut. I think I can remove it without the can. Okay. Is everything rusted everywhere around it, Ben? Is all of the exhaust rusted together as one? I just asked, what horsepower should I make on my 331 small block Ford, 228 cam, 185 heads, TFS intake, and it gave a range like you have videos of. Kind of cool. So they're referencing my stuff. What TFS intake manifold does it have? Have you done any work with the comp oilless turbos? We tried to run one way back. This was years ago, and it let go on the chassis dyno. Maybe they've cured. I'm sure that they've cured that problem before, but I haven't run one since then. I'm doing a 440 for a customer that's getting twin GT35s. Do you think GT35s is enough turbo for a stroke 440? It depends on what kind of power do you want the 440 to make? Two GT35s would probably make 1,000 horsepower. I don't know how much bigger you made the 440. What do you guys think an L21 would be worth? I don't know. You need to go online and see what other people are selling them for. Power steering cooler just came in. That's good. Use a closed single roller Gen 6 quality, 9 out of 10. Dual closed roller fits tight. Yeah, I think Comp made, or somebody made like a billet cover that's thicker for use with a double roller chain there. But yeah, I don't think you can't put the trigger wheel on there anymore. TFS track heat, EFI, 30-pound injectors. Okay. So a long run or EFI kind of deal. Is the inlet on that, is it 75 millimeters or is it smaller than that? I like those intake manifolds. Every time I've run those, they've worked well. Good power curve and stuff. 75. Okay, that's good. Good power curve. Obviously a high ram. It's going to make more power, but it's going to be softer down low. You're Mitten, you're overzealous in your comment. You're trying to be too right. You could walk in and say, hey, I don't think you could build a big block for 5,000, 7,000, 10,000, whatever you're saying. And then that's it. That's the end of your statement. You don't need to keep arguing. There's not need for that. You have your opinion and that's fine. And whether it's an absolute or not makes no difference. It's how you're presenting it that's the problem. And see, now you're oh, people. How's our poll? 90, still at 90%. That's pretty good. Should twin turbo big blocks be more popular in racing? It's just a cheap way to go because with a Gen 6, you already have reasonably good cylinder heads. And if you did more work to them and put ARP studs on it, stick a cam in there and valve springs, and then you're at 425 or whatever, and you're at 1,000 plus horsepower at not very much boost. Richard, what do you think about the Howard Richard cam and LS? Should that say Radler cam? I think probably. I've never tested a Radler cam, if that's the one that you're talking about. I don't think I've ever run it. The power limit of an engine is greatly influenced by what's between the ears. Nice. All right, Ben, I'll call you later, man. Howard's Radler, the Radler cam. I've had more than a few people ask about that, but honestly, I've never tested it. Do you know what the duration numbers are at 50? And I can kind of give you an idea what it's going to do, because I'm sure I've tested something that's like that. Currently running with a twin turbo big block. Good. GW2, what are you going to call him? Something nice, I hope. No, it's Ben from the Car Farm. I don't have to say nice things to him. That's my boy, yo. We're singing Deck the Halls. I'm looking at a race series. Engine spec is really loose. That's good. That's a good start. I like that. Stock size valve springs. An engine must pull 17 inches of vacuum. OEM 4-barrel and 1 5/8 headers. What kind of cam specs did you lend to good vacuum and make horsepower? Well, the magic LSA is out of the question. I don't want anything rattling my engine. You know, Scott, we used to run the Rattler balancers too, and they were really noisy. One of the things I wanted to do, and we talked about this for years because this goes back decades now. But one of the things we wanted to do is we wanted to hook up a knock sensor to it and see if those Rattler balancers would set the knock sensor off. In your opinion, what would be the ideal LS T56 turbo combo for a 500 to 700 horsepower daily street, as would like to place in my 335? I don't know what fitment is going to be like for turbos in that, or a turbo combination, but 700 horsepower is the GT45 territory. So that would be the turbo that I would recommend. Running a 588 twin turbo S475 T6 132 with a 300 VR roller cam in it, 1966 Biscayne. Is the motor running and driving around? 17 inches at 1,000 RPM. That's still going to be kind of limiting on cam. And there's no RPM limit, because the thing that you could do is it's going to be softer down low, but a wider LSA cam, the wide LSA cams that everybody hates, is good. It can make power on the big end. We need more late model Hemi content. I agree, and I'm trying to work on one right now. Might try the ZZ502 cam in my Gen 6. You think a 402 AFR head, 442, 600 lift? No, it'll be better down low than having a single plane on there, obviously. But a 242 cam is still going to be softer down low than if I was building a street motor that I was driving around, I wouldn't use that camshaft. If it's more of a performance-oriented cam and it's a cars and coffee kind of thing, or even something that you were taking to the strip where you're using RPM in this thing, then that cam would work. I remember back in the day, pretty sure it was a big solid lifter cam someone was setting off knock sensors in the Buick 6. I was looking at parts last night, realized that an LS2 block with a truck, flat top rotating assembly, and an LS3 top end with a BTR hot rod cam would be a great daily driver in my C4. 625, 236, 250. Wants to run this on my 5.3 NA with 243s and fast. That's a big cam in a 5.3. Are you wanting to make like lots of power on the big end? Rattler cam spec 525, 226, 234, 103 center line. But what's the LSA though? The rattling or clacking in the valve train gave him issues. I have a 97 Kate 2500 with a 454, so that's a Gen 6. If you could upgrade one thing, what would it be? The thing that's going to make the most power are the cam and springs on them. Do you like TCI Rattler balancers? I have one for a Pontiac V8, another one for a 400. I want to use both. We never had any problems with them. They just make a lot of noise. Serious Outlaw Enduro, so 50 to 100 lap, third mile track. So you probably are not going to want a lot of RPM on that then. So Lake's Custom. So you have calculations that suggest it might be effective to use the energy turning the crank instead of pumping air. Okay, you can try that. No RPM limit, but it needs to live for a good long time. Okay. And I don't know if you're limited by valve spring specs on that. I know that they have to look stock, but there's a lot of the Rattler cam is a 107 LSA. I haven't run a cam like that I remember. It should work good. The idle quality is going to be a little rough, but LSA is 115. Okay. So that's wide enough where that thing might fit. So if it depends on, do you want a top end kind of camshaft? That's what that is. 70 TA going to be full street truck. Think about picking up a 95 Chevy, 72 Chevelle 350 in it for $500. That's good. This is a good cam for an LS1. No, it's not. Should that be 233, 239 and a 114? Because a 233, 229 is not what I would recommend. Tested loss due to turbine back pressure is relatively easy to do. All you need to do is an indicator diagram for what your engine running at power, then sum the pumping loop differences. I don't know what you're saying there. The way to do it is to have two engines. Would 2 GT45s be enough on a big block Chevy? Seems like a stock big block Chevy might be okay. How about 4 GT45s? So if 2 is good, then 4 is better. 2 7875s would work. Yeah, 2 S475s, we know because we ran that too. I mean, that's 2,000 horsepower with turbo. Again, it just depends on how much power you want to make, and you just size your turbos accordingly. So we'll close out our poll. 91%. I gotta love people. People are people. And on that note, it's time to go. Hopefully I'll see you guys all tonight.